and okay, everybody, welcome. I'd like to welcome everybody who's joining us by Zoom this afternoon to listen to day 2 of the Seeding Creativity panel meeting. Today, we're going to be reviewing the second half of the 109 finalists for the grant. All guests are in listen mode only and will not have an opportunity to comment on the grants or answer any questions at this time. A couple of things to note about today. All of the applications have been read and reviewed by a peer panel with expertise in a number of different disciplines and pathways. All panelists are experienced and skilled in one or more creative practice or field, and we have had broad representation in both our preliminary and our final panels. So please remember that staff does not review or score applications for funding, only the panelists do. We're going to be going through these applications very quickly today. For some applications, there may be more discussion than for others. This is not a reflection on any application, but maybe just that there's agreement among the panelists and there's nothing else specific to add. So please note that each application has been thoroughly reviewed and scored by the entire panel before this meeting. Panelists can also make adjustments to their scores at the meeting, and final scores are going to be compiled at the end of the day and added to the day 1 scores. So the panel will be referring to each application by number only, not by artist name. So if you're an applicant listening in today, please have your grant number on hand so that you can see where we are in the process and which grant is yours. And we're going in reverse numerical order today. We've switched up the first one, but after that, we'll be going totally in reverse numerical order. If you can attend the entire meeting, please remember that we're going to be posting these sessions within the next few days on the Sacramento Office of Arts and Culture YouTube channel. At the end of the scoring, we will end the public meeting and the panel will then meet separately to review all of the scores from both sessions and make their final recommendations. If we have a number of artists that are at the cutoff point who maybe share the same or a similar score, the panel may take into account both the discipline and pathway to ensure that we have diverse representation of art forms and projects. We hope to contact all applicants within the next week or two to let you know the results, but we will not make a public announcement until after these grants have been reviewed by the Arts Commission on October 10th. And finally, as one of the 109 finalists from a pool of over 400, remember that your applications all rose to the top of a very large pool. We're at a difficult point of looking through really strong applications to determine which should be funded according to our funding rubric. So I want to thank you all for the work that you do to make Sacramento a more exciting, diverse, and interesting place for arts and culture. So with that, I think we're ready to begin our reviews. And the first application that we're going to review is going to be number 390. And John will be introducing that. And for listeners, please know that a panelist will introduce each application.
Thank you. Application number 390 is under the discipline of dance, and the pathway they've chosen is performance/presentation. And the project states that if funded, they will host a 3-day event, which includes dance workshops, a freestyle session, a dance battle, and showcases/performances, and an after party. This is a very detailed application. It says that it would, the funds if awarded would include renting a studio space at Clara Auditorium, or another studio. These are all named. It says the venue to be 10 hours a day. It wants to pay the artists, the rent. So as I said, it's very detailed, and it's that they try to explore throughout the entire 3-day event to celebrate individuality and confidence in oneself by bringing in unique talents that have created a career in dance, being themselves and not conforming to the industry standards definition of a successful professional dancer, as well as having community members from different styles and perspectives share their art through showcases and battle and enforce the idea that being different is something to find power and confidence in. I thought this was a well articulated and compelling application, and it has good details and also includes good mentorship. And I love the also inherent positivity that inspired by this artist. And they've got a good resume of experience as well as a good art sample, and the others can add on to that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, I also felt that this was a strong application. I also felt that the project concept lacked some details about how the students or participants will be informed of the opportunity and recruited for the opportunity. And I also would have liked to see some more detail about how the community will be engaged and impacted throughout the duration of the project. But again, I did also think it was a great application.
Okay. Anything else to add?
Yeah, I just want to maybe mention that recruitment is almost always a very tricky idea. So how do you recruit, when you say you do these things? So I just want to mention that as a general comment.
Great, thank you. Okay, then I would ask everybody to make sure that they've got their scores in and finalized. And then Rachel, if you're ready, we would start with 404.
Excellent. Forgive me, I have many tabs and I'm trying to make sure I'm in the right place. So for 404, the discipline is multidisciplinary arts and the pathway is research. And for this particular project, the concept is, and this is, number 404, as was said. Thank you. The concept is, as reads, my proposal includes research, application, and documentation of these dying Filipino cultural art practices. This artist will take an in-depth look at our ancestral knowledge of the indigo plant and dye practices. And I want to specify that the word dying, I want to make sure that I'm clear about what each means. So the artist uses dying in terms of fading out, going away, but is also talking about the art form of dyeing something. I found, this artist's approach to be really ingenious. There was a lot of excellent evidence as to how this artist is using this art form to keep this particular tradition alive. My constructive feedback to the artist, after just talking about how powerful the art was and how important it is to preserve the culture, is that this artist be really specific in as much as is possible about how they would use the funding that they're seeking to do the research and documentation that they've communicated is important to this art form.
Great, thank you. Anybody else want to add?
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, John. I agree. I thought that the project was really interesting, unique in terms of the overall applicant pool. I was missing a little bit of information regarding the grant guidelines, specifically with community engagement and how they were really going to elevate this beyond a research project. But I thought it was a beautiful survey and definitely unique.
Yes, I want to add a couple of comments. This applies generally to almost all the projections. One is the description of the art samples. It really does help to give some description. And then the second one is when somebody makes a proposal of a project implying that it may be exhibited or presented in the future, it's important to have some inkling that, some effort have been made, to at least give a hint of where that might be. The stronger that is, the better it is.
Okay. Thank you. If we're all done, we can move on to the next application, which would also be you, Rachel, 393.
Okay, so for 393, the discipline is also multidisciplinary arts. The pathway is research as well. I believe the last was research. And this artist, project concept is, this project will thoroughly research and collect the history of immigrant experiences in Sacramento and how it has either expanded or remained the same throughout time. They talk about leveraging their sociology degree to be able to do this using data and also storytelling as part of this process. My feedback and celebration of this particular artist was, one moment. They talked about decolonizing ways of operating, and I shared that I thought that was a really beautiful way to encapsulate how they're focusing on their work and how they've been able to apply their academic knowledge to an artist context. I had mostly celebration. I shared that I felt like this approach as a learning and educational tool would be very different than what might be presented in a sociology textbook, and that would be quite valuable for audiences to engage with. I didn't note any constructive feedback. I really enjoyed this particular submission and thought it was well done and well described.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
I'd like to add that this is an important project on often misunderstood cultural community. The Sikhs have been mistaken as Muslims and gotten, their share of Black. And I thought the narrative was compelling and well written.
Thank you.
The only thing, I'm sorry, I just wanted to add something real quickly for this application is I also thought it was very powerful application. In the spirit of how the lens that I looked at all of the applications with a heavy lens on community engagement. I just wish there was more detail about like how the researching and collecting of stories will go, especially when dealing with this subject, like the sensitivities or like the details of that process and how the people who share those stories will be protected. Just details like that, especially because of the specific issues like assimilation and racism and police that will be touched on. Some more detail to explain that process. And the sensitivities of that process would have helped, but still very powerful, great application.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Rachel, putting you on the spot, 386.
All right. Thank you for your patience as I navigate.
Oh, no, we're good.
Thank you. So for 386, discipline, multidisciplinary arts, pathway, performance and presentation. This artist, project concept, they share, I want to explore the pathways various individuals throughout the African Black individuals connected to different parts of the continent of Africa and their families, they denote either blood or chosen, have taken physically, emotionally, and mentally to reside in the current region of the Sacramento area through an Afrofuturistic lens as a means of reconciling the past, present, and potential future history of the African Black diaspora. That is all one sentence, so let me do my best to summarize. This artist, my understanding, is focused on taking an Afrofuturistic lens and thinking about how folks connect to that by virtue of their family history, their lived experience, etc. My feedback to this artist was celebration first for identifying an avenue through which they can share their many different talents in various disciplines. My constructive feedback to this artist was to logistically take some of the longer sentences and break them up in this proposal so that they could be more readily understood. But then secondarily, to be really clear with reviewers and audiences about what they mean by some of the terms that they're using, like Afrofuturistic. I know, but I don't know that everybody knows, so that that work can be more accessible.
Thank you. Additional comments?
Yeah, I felt like the project it was a little the proposal itself was a little dense. And as Rachel mentioned, you know, the way that it was structured, the sentences kind of had me rereading it a couple times. So I wanted to be sure that I had a more clear understanding of the proposal itself. But I thought it was like a really interesting concept, definitely unique in terms of the greater body of applicants that we received. I think that there could be more emphasis on the community engagement side of things and the execution and outlining like how the project would be executed with regard to community context, and how one could learn and engage with this project once it is executed. But I thought it was a pretty strong proposal. After I dissected it, I thought it was strong.
I have some questions. I'm not sure what the outcome is because there's no potential venue. Like, how is this? I know it's supposed to be a research pathway, but I don't know what it
No,
leads
this is
to.
performance, I think.
Performance?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a venue mentioned? Because it said it's gonna, the end product will include video, and yet there's no video sample. So it's a little, again, you know, some unclearness about that.
Thank you. Okay, you can please finalize your scores. And the next application is 385, which is Lula to introduce.
Sure. 385, the discipline is music. The pathway is performance presentation. This artist will produce a 3-day multi-art form exhibit in celebration of the release of their debut album, Montague, the Unwritten Shakespearean Tragedy, in collaboration with a visual artist and a media group. Artists will erect art pieces, physical and film inspired, both physical and film inspired art pieces by extravagant budding love, and navigating it and processing the loss of it. And those are the themes foundational to their debut album. My comments were that the artist is dedicated to fostering collaboration by providing opportunities for artists to meet with a purpose, which I thought was very powerful and was a strong point of this application. I also would have liked to hear more details about how the community will be engaged beyond the performing artists. And also that the project concept could have been strengthened with more information about how this project will impact community after its completion. I felt that it was unfortunate because I felt that this application was actually very strong. I really enjoyed reading it, and I felt like the artist's contribution to the community is very deep and it's proven, but when it was time to read the project breakdown itself, it was just really lacking the vision for the community engagement portion. And I just, it ended up impacting that section of the scoring, but it was unfortunate because the whole package is very powerful, so.
Thank you. Anyone have anything they'd like to add?
Yeah, I like the artistic sample, and I thought it was a very ambitious project.
Thank you. Okay. Then we can finalize scores and move on to the next application, which is 384, and also will be led by Lula.
384, the discipline is literary arts and the pathway is research. So This artist will continue to establish their role as the editor and writer for an existing show called Artists Art Notes, artists in parentheses because it's the artist's name. So artist name, Art Notes, featuring daily Monday through Friday reviews, essays, artist profiles, and upcoming visual and performing arts events. The artist will hire 3 Sacramento-based arts writers to complete an editorial each to contribute to the publication and arts community. This will be featuring a discourse of over 50 Sacramento-based artists. The artist will also produce 5 virtual artist talks and 3 in-person critiques. It's a very ambitious project, and it adds to an already existing art project of this artist. My comments were that I appreciated the artist's dedication to equitable compensation. It's something that they highlighted in their application. It was very refreshing to read. And also the project concept would have been strengthened with more detail about how the project will engage the community. This artist mentions that the community will have further involvement with the arts, but then beyond that statement, there's not really a clear plan of how the community will be engaged through the project. And so I thought that that was an opportunity for improvement, but still a very strong application from an artist who has already shown that they're deep in the work.
Yeah, I second a lot of what you said, Lula. A key component of this, which stood out, was the equitable compensation using the wage certification model, which, you know, we've heard about throughout a lot of these applications about how artists will compensate, with the honorarium that some of their collaborators, but I think that the reference to the wage certification was really refreshing to see. I also want to note that I think that this really stood out to me as unique in terms of the greater applicant pool. And I really liked the concept of examining critical discourse and through a creative lens. I felt like that was kind of a subject matter that wasn't really referenced in many of the other applications with this kind of depth and focus.
Anyone else want to add?
Yeah, I'll just read my comments. Wonderful project involving the critique and writing on art. Great samples, though an actual submission of a video would be nice. A worthy and meaningful project from a qualified artist and art historian.
Okay. If there are no other comments, finalize scores. And move on to number 382, Rachel.
Thank you. So this artist discipline is visual arts. Their pathway is social impact. And what I'd like to share about this artist is that they are exploring and raising awareness of the wellness movement within the BIPOC community. They spell it out to make sure everyone understands Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And this is motivated by their particular experience as a member of that community. Relative to the specific project, this artist has outlined a plan to carry out what they call the Day of Wellness Exchange, which is a day-long art exhibit featuring a documentary and photos that highlight the wellness experiences and practices of 6 BIPOC wellness instructors as they expose 6 participants to these new and unique approaches. My feedback to this artist was that this was in celebration, a very powerful and important vision, and that I was moved by their focus on building community wellness, especially for youth. The constructive feedback that I gave to this artist is, I gave to many artists actually within this pool, that when we're talking about wellness or mental health, my recommendation was that if they are not themselves a mental health practitioner, that they seek the support of a mental health practitioner for the design and execution of their work, to make sure that folks who are participating are as safe and as supported as possible throughout the process, both for the artist's benefit, but also for the participants.
Any other comments?
I have one thing to note. I thought that this proposal was interesting, but it could have been a little bit more in depth. A one-day event, to me, it seems like it could have a lot more impact if it were like a small festival, or, they're reaching a lot of artists, or they're attempting to reach a lot of artists and attempting to collaborate with quite a few. I feel like maybe, broadening this out a little bit over a couple of days could have made it a stronger proposal in my mind. Additionally, I think we've referenced this before, how are they going to go and select these wellness instructors and those who are going to be helping lead the proposal, or the event. And I think, maybe in different sort of looking at this differently from like, how are you going to select your community? These are supposed to be their partners. It maybe would have helped to say, sort of like what Rachel was saying, working with these, mental health professionals from XYZ, or like, tapping into the resources from this institution, et cetera, I think could maybe have strengthened this proposal a little bit more in my mind. But overall, I thought that it was touching a lot of really important issues that needed to be addressed. So
Thank you. Any other final comments? Okay. Then we can move to 378. Lula.
Thank you. 378, the discipline is media arts and visual arts, and the pathway is social impact. So the proposed project, the artist will complete a 15 to 30-minute historical fantasy science fiction short film about a time traveler that visits Locke, which is the last rural Chinatown in the United States outside of Sacramento, in the 1930s to stop generational trauma. The film will address issues in the Asian community by starting conversations on how we can face our traumas and take away their power to dictate our lives. The artist also mentions that the film could raise money for the SHRA, so they can further preserve an aging landmark like Locke and further develop local housing needed with the rising market prices for homes. I did note, though, that they said the film could raise money, because when I was considering the cross-sectional relation or partnering, then I was considering that, but it did say could, unfortunately. But my comments were that the applicant's details about how the community will be impacted included the names of specific organizations that will be impacted and how, and it also highlights opportunity for cross-sector collaboration through the SHRA, and the community impact of the project is clearly detailed. So I definitely appreciated all of that. And also, I just want to point out that of all of the applications that I read, this one is definitely one of the ones that stood out the most to me. I thought I knew a lot about the history of the region, and I'd never heard this, and I thought it was very powerful. And the work samples definitely support the technical skill needed to do something like this, and I think it would be a big benefit to the community. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Any other additional comments?
just real quick, I have the same sentiment as a lot of what you said, Lula. And I wanted to note, I think we've talked about this briefly, that, we want to support emerging artists. And, this artist is only 22, which I found really impressive, considering the detail and thoroughness of the proposal, as well as the skill level represented in the work samples. So I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, I like to add my comments. It's a timely and very relevant project addressing the significance of Locke to the overseas Chinese community. A compelling narrative with much insight from a young artist. My slight concern and question are about bilingualism. Assuming this is a non-Chinese speaker, if he is to make inroads with these organizations, language and dialect may be an issue, but I assume that's more technical. But I thought that was a very well-written application.
Okay. Thank you. Please finalize your scores. And we're going to move on to 373. And John is going to take the lead on this one.
Uh-oh, hold on.
Take your time.
I'm sorry, Melissa, is 373 mine, or I might have.
Oh, no, I think 373 is, it's mine.
Oh, my bad.
Is it okay? You can both
Yeah,
talk.
No, it's all
You
good.
can take it if you want.
I had prepared for it, but please, I'm happy.
You will have then something you can add.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Thank you, Lula. Yeah, my computer's just a little slow. Yeah, this is under music, and the pathway is performance and presentation. Okay, the project is a DJ class that will provide students the skills to pursue a career in the disc jockey field. As a performance-based field, the goal is to provide interested community members visible means of making income, developing public speaking skills, and become proficient media curators. These skills lead to other highly sought after job skills in the field of hospitality, broadcasting, and multimedia. Okay. This is a fairly strong and practical application. It basically has lessons. I thought the art sample was good because it is a video that actually identify as less than 19, and it's a short video that presumably people can go to with this artist and learn about what he has to teach on these different lessons. So there's a step-to-step kind of way to do that, and I thought it was a good that a project is a mentorship to increase business training and opportunities. He's got a fairly impressive resume with many radio stations. So I'll let others, since Lulu is also one of the leads, take it over.
Thank you. I actually agree with everything you said. I thought this application was very strong. That's one of the first things I thought was the practicality of it. I was like, I can clearly see the vision from start to end of how this can happen in its entirety. The only thing that I was so sad about was again, the community engagement portion needing more details, especially with like the role of like even historically, like within hip hop, like the role of the DJ in community engagement and impact is so strong. I just felt like it was such a great opportunity to expand on that, and I didn't see it. But with that said, I agree 100% with John, and I definitely felt that this was a very practical, positive project that can definitely be executed by this artist.
Yeah, real quick, I thought that I didn't know very much, or I never really thought personally and didn't know very much about the art of DJing, and just reading the proposal, I felt like I was informed. So I was really impressed with this proposal on a lot of levels that y'all already mentioned.
Thank you all. We're going to move on to 365. Lula.
Yes, 365. The discipline is theater and secondary is multidisciplinary arts, and the pathway is performance and presentation. The artist will devise a group performance called Just a Pinch that will address the treatment of women during outpatient reproductive healthcare procedures, with a focus on the lack of pain relief and empathy that women experience in medical procedures. So the artist will work with community-based organizations rooted in medical equity work to identify women, to share their stories, and provide the CBOs, and the artist will also provide the resources from these community-based organizations at the show when the show is put on for the community. The project has 3 phases. Phase 1 is interviews. Phase 2 is the casting, ensemble, the building, the devising, rehearsing, and then phase 3 is the performing the final piece for the community. And my comments were that I wanted to highlight a standout quote from the artist's statement. The artist said, "I find that a commitment to cultural competency and representation is moving the needle towards true inclusivity, not only of artists, but audiences." I mean, obviously, based on my commentary on all of the applications, was jumping for joy when I read that quote. I thought it was a very powerful quote. And I did feel like, though, that the project concept could have benefited from more details around the spirit of this quote. So I do feel that the artist's intentions and vision is definitely in line with community engagement solely off of their artist statement. But I think the project concept details could have probably used more details around that. But overall, I thought the project concept was unique and it engages cross-sector explorations in healthcare, gender discrimination, access, socioeconomic status. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll add on. I said it's a well-articulated narrative on a timely topic on women's health, especially after the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Also, project shows good methodology and engagement.
Okay, thank you. Make sure your scores are in. And again, just want to remind everybody, hit submit when you're putting your scores in. It's okay. You can still go in at any point in time, but I think occasionally people are forgetting to hit submit, and we want to make sure we have all your scores. So the next one is 364, and John will lead.
Okay. This is under the discipline of dance, pathway, performance, and presentation. This is from a Filipino applicant. It says on June 10th, 11, prior to Philippine Independence Day, I will hold a public ticketed event at Luther Burbank, John F. Kennedy, and Consumnes Oaks High School that will showcase my work as a choreographer. My recital, where I will present various Filipino folk dance and share important dances of Philippine history. This is on the dance tradition of tiningling, which is unique to the Philippines, involving clackers of bamboo poles. And there's a fairly good video that shows performances at one of the festivals. This is under should be also cultural preservation in addition to dance. And it shows that the artists have been doing this in the community for over 15 years, teaching and basically working and promoting art and culture of the Philippines. And I state that clearly stated narration on primarily a cultural preservation project. Nice to know that the artist has been active, for 15 years, and I'll let others add on to it.
Thank you.
I appreciated the artist's focus on two particular things I hadn't heard many times in this pool. They're focused on adding to the cultural tradition while still maintaining the essence of it. And so they spoke about, not fusing it with hip hop or not fusing it with other quote dance forms, but making sure that there is a building happening for future generations.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Finalize your score and we'll move on to 363, Lula.
Thank you. 363. So the discipline is dance. The secondary is multidisciplinary arts. The pathway is performance presentation. The artist will produce a show called Healing Healed. that is a mixture of dance, live bands, and vocalists telling the story of why mental health matters. The dance concert will include pieces that tell the story of how mental health plays a role in our day-to-day lives, and it will also give performers resume experience and insight on live productions. The drawing the audience in with the new sound and visuals of dance concerts, the theme and storyline of the show will focus on social impact, mental health, on the social impact mental health has on Black and person of color communities. My comments were that the artist's approach to merging dance and sociology to address mental health stigma is creative and unique, timely, powerful. I also felt that the artist provided the evidence of working to advance the discipline in their artist statement. That I also felt that the project concept would have been strengthened with more information about how the community will be engaged and impacted beyond the artists who will be collaborating directly for the project. So I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but I mean.
Thank you. Any additions?
I will join you in the broken record category, perhaps at that risk, only to double click on the importance of artists that are doing work that intersects with the field of mental health, that they are engaging practitioners for their benefit and also for community benefit.
Okay. Any final comments? We can move right on to number 360. And John is introducing it.
Yeah. Number 360 is under the discipline of theater, and the pathway is performance and preservation. The project is to fund, to conduct a theater education elective, okay, with 7th and 8th graders at Leonardo da Vinci School. This is an outgrowth, I think, of the work that the applicant has done with K and 6th graders. So this is in some ways an advancement, or a large older age group with the people that she worked with. That the goal of the elective will be to create a theater presentation in which students enact the experiences of recent immigrants to America. Students will interview 3 or 4 people who have immigrated to this country, and then with guidance, write up a series of scenes based on those stories. They will then perform those scenes for an audience of peers and parents. I have used the methods in my on-stage classes for years. In my experience, the show the kids have helped create, as opposed to pre-published script, is often the case, creates a greater sense of ownership and emotional investment. I appreciate this empathetic project from an educator, and I see this project, the sort of underserved or the disadvantaged community really are the immigrants, the people who are going to be interviewed, and I'm assuming that they will also be, in the audience and invited. So I like the community engagement that that exists between the students and the immigrants, and I'll let others add on.
Any additional comments?
I just wanted to double down on what John said about how the applicant pointed out that engaging student participants in script development will impact the emotional investment. I thought that was a very important detail. A lot of folks in applications talked about teaching in some kind of teaching capacity, and I think highlighting that getting kids to take it seriously and be invested in it requires that early on participation, and highlighting that as part of the project was smart.
The good art sample and good resume with lots of engagement.
Great. Thank you. Okay, finalize your scores and we'll get ready to move to 358. And John, you're going to lead that as well.
Yikes. Okay. Okay.
You having
This
trouble?
is yeah, I'm okay now.
Okay.
This discipline is under design, and the pathway is creation. Okay. The project is a Hmong batik. Is an art form that is rarely practiced here in the United States. I propose to create a Hmong batik fashion collection for both men and women, showcasing traditional techniques in a modern form, while creating the design and community will feel that they are on a journey with me, as I will be also sharing the technique of Hmong batik. This will help bridge generations between the elders and the youth. And there's a detailed proposed budget, which I do have a little bit question on about the studio rental, which does not specific, well, anyway. I also have a little bit of question. I felt that the applicant is foremost a designer and only secondary as a batik artist. It sounds like that the project more looks like a personal exploration and development than a leader in the Hmong batik field. The art samples show no workshop activities. So I'm a little confused about batik workshop. Also on the itemized purchase of material, it just says batik tools and material in a workshop, but and then it says material for batik fashion line from Laos and Vietnam. It does talk about all these, but I don't see, the actual dyeing and working of batik. So I'm a little confused, and I wonder if anybody else can shed light on this.
Yeah, I agree. I think there was a slight disconnect between, or I guess just disconnect in general with the proposal. I felt like they kind of, the artist sort of mentioned these workshops, but never really talked about the structure of the workshops. So I was kind of confused if the proposal was for making this fashion line or was for these workshops and classes. I don't know. I just felt like it wasn't really concise, the proposal, which sort of led me to confusion on what the project was going to entail. I also, while I appreciate the budget that they proposed, the grant doesn't ask for a breakdown of the budget. So I felt like it may have lended the budget, including the budget, may have lended itself to my confusion in trying to interpret what exactly the artist was, or how exactly the artist would use these grant funds.
Yeah, I read this as she was, or the person is going to buy batik fabric and then it incorporate into design. If that's the case, then, anyway, some confusion.
Any additional comments? Okay, then we can move on to the next one. Thanks. And the next one will be 357, Lula.
Thank you. 357, the discipline is visual arts. The secondary is multidisciplinary arts, and the pathway is research. The funds from this grant would support the artist solo exhibition featuring a new art series exploring the artist's African American family lineage using video, sound, sculpture, via installations and interactive art featuring historical elements and found objects. Funds would go towards researching the artist's African-American lineage in Mississippi. So that would partially include some of the funds going to travel expenses, lodging, and media art supplies, purchasing media art supplies. So I felt that this application was very interesting. I enjoyed reading it. Made me curious what the end product would be like. But I did feel that the project concept was missing community engagement details. I also felt, and this might just be me, so I'm open to some clarification from someone who understood better, but I had trouble understanding what the tangible outcome was going to be in the end. I felt like there was a picture painted of where the project was going, but I still had a hard time understanding in the end what the tangible outcome would be. I felt that the artist's work samples were truly extraordinary, and the artist's approach to their discipline is really unique. I just felt that there was some important information missing, and it made it really hard to score some sections, which was unfortunate because I thought it was quite powerful.
Yeah, I second everything you just said. Strong work, missed a lot of the grant guidelines, but just to touch on what I think that the tangible outcome was a solo exhibition. Now, where, what, etc., we don't know, but I think, just kind of thinking about it briefly like that, I guess there is technically a tangible outcome, but, lack of detail.
This is a specific and also general comment based on this artist. I think that what we see many times is artists presenting what they have in work samples as evidence of how they could reinvent themselves. And I think there is a challenge with describing what the reinvention will be. And I did experience that with this artist. And name that is challenging to describe, and yet it is helpful to understanding what the tangible outcome is.
Thank you. Thank you. Next is going to be number 356. John, you have the next two.
Okay. .356 is under the dance discipline and the pathway of performance and presentation. Yeah, this is based on the theme of the homeless. It says, if funded, I will follow the performance pathway on a large-scale collaboration with the local organization, Loaves and Fishes, a nonprofit, which is concerned about the needs of the homeless and indigenous poor and provide services and hospitality. In Sacramento, dance has become an expensive practice, which includes those who are homeless, which excludes those who are homeless or unable to participate in classes due to financial constraint. This project will culminate in a public performance open to the Sacramento community and held on the grounds of Loaves and Fishes. And in general application, there is no evidence that this artist has gotten an agreement from the site, Loaves and Fishes, to collaborate in such a project, which I assume could be a logistical nightmare, especially if it involves a sort of sensitive community. So if that's not in place, I just don't have a lot of confidence in how this would take place. Now, so I just read the comment. The concept of exploring homelessness at Loaves and Fishes might be a good one, but the applicant has not indicated the organization's willingness to participate. Not certain that the artist is ready for such a project. So others can add on. I also feel the resume is fairly thin.
Any other thoughts? Okay. We can move on to the next one, which will be 354.
Okay, that's me again.
It is you again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm needing to return to the, maybe I could just hit next, huh? Maybe, maybe it's just me. 364.
354.
Oh, 354, sorry. Okay, 354 is on multidisciplinary arts, and the pathway is social impact. Okay, projects for the purpose of this grant, I will be adopting my quote, paying to power school curriculum to community-based workshops. Using this curriculum, participants will be hearing my journey as a Black boy growing up in South Sacramento to an accomplished spoken words artist. I will be using my community partnership to host monthly poetry workshops in 6 locations across Sacramento. Some potential and likely locations will be the Roberts Family Development Center, Fruitridge Collaborative, Oak Park Community Center, Sierra Health Foundation, Queen Sheba, and Sojourner Truth Museum. The project is community-centric through all stages in the process. I have relationship with community-based organizations, community leaders, etc. The project addresses the issue of emotions that are top of mind, about anger, depression, so forth. I feel that this is a very strong application. The project looks like an expansion of what the artist has been doing for 15 years. The personal story is compelling and the project is worthwhile. Video samples could be better in quality, although it aptly shows engagement from the students. And I'll let others add.
I felt that, oh, excuse me.
Go ahead.
I felt that there was something really spectacular about his ability to engage the audience. Even though we couldn't see them, we could hear them. And I found that that was really beautiful and powerful.
Any last comments? Are we good? All right, great, thank you. Next is 349, Lula.
Yes, 349. The discipline is multidisciplinary arts and the secondary is literary arts. The pathway is performance presentation. So the artist will create a public performance titled Fire, Breathing in the Wild, composing of spoken word poetry, rap, live instruments, call and response, and breathing exercises. The artist will continue the rich arts legacy of the Oak Park community, and the artist will partner with community-based organizations. Some that were named in the application include the Soul Collective, NorCal Resist, They will partner with organizations such as to make the work accessible and contribute to their work through donated proceeds and promotions that can be in collaboration with the proposed project. The work will also be accessible in digital format for the learnings to continue beyond the realm of the performance itself. I commented that I felt that the artists made strong claims about community engagement, including partnering and fundraising, and also providing solace around social issues like racism, mental health, and etc. In the spirit of previous applications I've commented on, when topics like these are brought up, I'm always looking for details about how the community will be engaged, how harm will be reduced or prevented. So, I would have liked to see some more details explaining how the community will be engaged in this capacity, besides just being an audience for the completed work. I also felt that the artists' work samples and CVs that they provided demonstrated a strong, strong technical skill in their discipline, and they demonstrated the ability to complete all aspects of the project based on their existing body of work. So I appreciated what they provided to show that they can finish what they said they'd finish. Yep.
Thanks. Any additional comments? Something different to add? Okay, great, thank you. We are getting close to a break, so don't worry. I'm going to do 1, 2, 3 more applications, and then we can take our first break. Next one is 348. John?
.348 is a dance discipline, and its presentation the Sacramento Dance Sampler would use this grant to hold 3 performances in a downtown venue and be able to provide honorarium, production values, and exposure for participating artists, and also provide opportunities to expand audiences and cultivate young audiences for the art of dance in Sacramento. The goal is that the sampler will become an annual citywide focal point for dance in Sacramento, and in the event that celebrates Sacramento's distinctive and broad artistry. The venue will be confirmed, and production work curation will culminate in 3 tangible celebrations, 3 performances in March and April of 2023. It relates to her previous work, which she has done on a university level. I think this is a rather unique program in that it wants to establish an annual event. And she is really trying to provide, it's a valuable proposal from a longtime dance educator that seeks to enhance young and diverse dancers' opportunities via an annual samplers series. I think her experience and sampler supports the project in which she intends.
Thank you. Something else to add? Okay. John, again, you 344.
Okay. This is a multidisciplinary arts proposal, and the pathway is social impact. My work with the dolls and involvement with the art therapy is not random. At the age of 21, I found myself in a his office talking about a lifelong struggle with disorder eating. Is this mine?
344?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. I didn't. Okay. That's
okay. Somebody
Yeah, I've
else can
read it, of
also
course.
chime in around the comments, but if you
Yeah,
could
yeah.
just do the intro.
I don't remember reading on it. Past year, okay, college. After graduation, my access to mental health services would be terminated. During this time, I realized, let me just check.
Can you just do the project concept? Or is that the project concept?
Yeah, that is the project concept.
Okay, sorry.
Just reading that, yeah. That's why I'm doing some. Okay, let me just read my comments. I said, wish samplers included more works in paper mache. Okay, overall a worthy project engaging Spanish speakers on acculturation. Okay, so yeah, she talks about using paper mache as a sort of therapeutic creativity, and that the paper mache dolls allow me to connect to a cultural object through which I could see myself and tell my stories about eating disorders, which itself was connected to my migration stories, one of being uprooted and brought into a new culture and language that eventually developed into unhealthy coping mechanism. Anyway, yeah, I thought that since this is on paper mache, I think her samples are mostly two-dimensional. Only I think there's a little like retablo thing, which is a like a box. But again, it's a little disconnect between what she's proposing to do with paper mache, and then not really giving really enough examples to show that she does have the wherewithal.
Okay,
Others, please. Yeah.
others?
I just wanted to add that I felt that the applicant's CV provided showed that they had conducted like multiple workshops, which I felt confident that what they were proposing they could do. I also wanted to point out that I appreciated that they are going to be conducting the workshops in Spanish. I know this applicant mentioned in the statement and also in their project concept the commitment to providing this as an artistic avenue for their community, and also providing it as something to balance out the stressors and mental health stress, within the community. So all of those connections that the applicant mentioned, I feel are supported by the strong CV, basically showing that they can definitely do this project. So I thought that was good.
Thank you. Anybody else want to add anything? Okay, thank you. We're going to do one more before break, and that's going to be Lula, number 342.
Sure. The discipline is media arts. The secondary is visual arts. The pathway is creation. So this artist will create a documentary on the homeless crisis in Sacramento. The artist has been visually documenting the homeless sweeps and the plight of several unhoused Sacramentans since 2019, and has a deep sense of the different aspects involved with the complex project like this. The artists will continue in their vision and philosophy of centering the voices and experiences of the most impacted, and the artist is working to shine a light on the true experiences happening within the community. The artist submitted work samples that demonstrate strong technical skill in documentary filmmaking and with a strong research component. My comments were that the artist states that their body of work has significant impact within their discipline, but I think there was room for maybe some explanation on that. I felt that was a strong statement, and I did think the work samples were strong, so I believe that it's there, but I would have liked to see it maybe written out. It would have been a good way to kind of understand where the artist is coming from, by understanding what they feel is a significant impact and when they feel validated in their discipline. And also, I felt that the project heavily relies on interviews with those experiencing being unhoused, and will tell the stories for them. And so for this reason, the project concept should go more in depth about how the interviewees will be identified, how the artist will engage with the unhoused community and Sacramento community at large in a way that is not extractive of the unhoused community.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, thank you very much. I think we're in really good shape for time. I'm just making sure that we stay on schedule so that we can finish in our allotted time, but we're in good shape. Could we come back at 1:30? Would that be okay? And
Yep.
we'll be in good shape. So you feel free to turn your camera and mic off, and we'll see you back at 1:30. Thanks, everyone.
333. Okay. The discipline is media arts and the pathway is social impact. The artist will create a 15-minute video examining the life and career of Virna Kansan, who's been described by the Black press and the NAACP as the mother of the civil rights movement in the West. Virna was the manager of the NAACP Sacramento Credit Union during the era of redlining when Blacks were denied homes in the region. Virna made housing and other loans available to minorities, which increased the credit union's assets tenfold. Virna only recently passed in 2003, and as one African-American journalist noted, of all the pioneers who have made Black America great, the most people don't know about, she is one of the most unheralded of the unheralded. So the film will hopefully highlight Virna's work and add to this artist's body of work, which will continue to provide historical background for some of the inequities that we see today. I struggled a lot with writing that summary. I apologize, it was long. I couldn't leave any part of it out. I was really blown away by this application. I would strongly encourage the artist's statement, just even the story behind how this artist got to a place where they're doing this project was very beautiful, stumbling upon a historic artifact. I believe the story was the president of the United States had written a telegram to someone in Sacramento being summoned. It was President Kennedy. I mean, the story behind how this artist got here is incredible. The artist demonstrates experience necessary to complete the project in full. But I did feel that the project concept would be enhanced with more information about how the community will be engaged. But the completed project will be valuable in its informative and historic capacity, which I know that in and of itself is community engagement. But beyond that, it would have been good to know how the artist plans to engage the community around this subject. But it's very strong.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
I appreciated so much that this artist was able to find a particular unspoken corner of history and elevate it for us. That there's nothing wrong with replicated art. It's beautiful to have multiple modes of artistic expression, but there's something very special about an artist who can find that and elevate that story.
Yeah, I also mentioned that the recovery of historical social truth is critical to the history of any community. And a shout out to this artist for doing good work relevant to our city.
Thank you. Okay, finalize your scores and we'll move on to 309, and that's John.
Okay. I must have a different list.
Oh, John, if you don't have that, somebody else maybe could jump in.
Yeah, I'm having trouble negotiating 312. Okay, 309, I'm there.
Okay. Does anybody else want to introduce? If
Oh, well, okay, I have this.
you got it, okay.
Yeah, this is under visual arts and performance and presentation. Okay. This is going to be a presentation of a 3 to 5 person group exhibition and public discussion exploring the diversity, history, and depth of the artist's experience in the Sacramento Valley region, tentatively entitled, quote, Call and Response, Sacramento Valley, unquote. I will invite local artists to produce and exhibit artwork created specifically in response to a piece of art or a body of work by another Sacramento Valley artist, past or present. Chosen artists will exhibit their new work at a local art space and participate in a panel discussion where they all be invited to speak on their new piece. The art and artists will be responding to and their viewpoints in the benefits and challenges of working as an artist in the Sacramento Valley region, expanding on my past work in artist support and artist community building. My primary goal for this project are to support participating artists in the development of their piece and to highlight the history of regional community artists. This is a very, I'm trying to get to my comment. Yeah, this is a rather unusual one in that it's there's an experimental space that in which this artist had found or co-founded, and it's very unique in that they are more interested. Let's see. In which they really are kind of a consulting area for people to present their art. It's sort of a garage and including a driveway in which many things can take place, and it's all on problem solving. It's a little, that's why I had to read that thing. It's a little hard to grasp exactly what it is, and I like the others to pitch in.
Yeah, I thought that this was kind of really interesting, just, you know, considering it as a curatorial proposal. I think we mentioned this last session when we were reviewing the first round of applicants, but this is only one of two curatorial proposals that we saw within all of the submissions. So I appreciated that. I agree, you know, I think that there is some ambiguity in terms of the final project, partially because we don't necessarily know who the artist or the curator is going to select. But I also think that there's some solid research that the artist has done to sort of fully translate their point of view and their artistic statement towards what the exhibition will be presenting. I could see that I really appreciated the work samples that the artist included. I thought that they were a really concise aesthetic and contemporary aesthetic, which falls into my personal wheelhouse. So I appreciated that. So I can kind of see that wherever the sort of gaps maybe necessarily in the proposal would be executed, I think, clearly and concisely.
Any last comments?
Very quickly, I think there's also a challenge when you're talking about art, that this is not a technical term, but that I classify as living art in some capacities. So who's in the room really determines how the art plays. So I want to name the challenge of being able to state what that will be prior to the moment occurring.
Thank you. Okay. Next application is 297, and that will be Kara.
Great, I'm excited to go.
I know, we made you.
I've been silent this whole time. Hardly. Applicant number 297. Their primary discipline is visual arts, secondary discipline is literary arts, and the pathway is creation. The artist statement and the project proposal are kind of, they go hand in hand. So I think the artist needed to maybe be more specific with what was what. So I'm going to kind of reference both. The artist is going to make a book consisting of photographs they took of the skateboarding scene in Sacramento area in the 1980s. At the time, the artist was a journalism student at Sacramento State University, and was shooting photos and writing stories for Thrasher magazine. They're really going to lean into the DIY tradition of skate zines and books that Andy Warhol made between 1952 and 1960. And then down into the project concept a little bit more, the artist will be digitizing negatives, selecting photos from the negatives, and then cleaning up in an editing process, making mock-ups of a book, sharing it with the skate community to get their input. And there will be opportunities for the community to engage with the project by writing and drawing on the photos. There's more here. It's a little chopped up with the project description. But my overall thoughts were that this project has a lot of good meat on its bones. I think the photos are strong and the overarching concept is unique and interesting, but I think the artist is missing a few elements of the grant guidelines as well as specifics regarding the audiences. They mention community engagement, but it kind of just like stops there with just that mention of it. Who will the artists be engaging with? How are they selecting them? What will they be doing to promote this project? And they mentioned the Center for Sacramento History, but there's really no further development or support that collaboration or partnership could come to fruition. What will they even be doing there? What skate park communities specifically are they using? Since the photos were already taken, I was hoping for a little bit more context with like what the subject matter was within the photos. And I was also a little bit concerned about how the project doesn't necessarily take place in a disinvested community or express the experience of historically marginalized communities, both of which are key components of the grant.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next one, which is 296, and Rachel will lead that one.
Thank you. So again, applicant 296, the discipline is visual arts and the pathway is creation. This artist describes themselves as being trained in traditional Chinese art, as well as Western approaches to art, and also describes themselves as someone who has endured several different economic, social, and political circumstances. They refer to their art as gesture painting, and they describe that process by saying they rely on the brushstrokes that reflect the directional movements of body, arms, hands, and fingers through the brush, and that these brushstrokes reference Chinese characters, and they go on from that place. They reference a work called Water Essential Series, in which they reinvestigate their own ethnic identity and diasporic experience through the formal and
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. Are you doing 295 or 296?
I'm doing 269. So let me fall back. I wanted to be ready for you, Melissa. I wanted to be ready to go.
I also think 269 is mine.
Fascinating. Okay. I may have just clicked the wrong thing.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, you shouldn't be sorry. That's on me because I clicked the wrong thing.
Are we on 269?
No, we're on 296. We're just
296.
inverting it. Thank you.
Melissa, I was trying to make you so proud, and then
you were on top of it.
Okay. Community, let me start again. So discipline is actually dance, and pathway is actually performance and presentation. And so for this applicant, give me 1 second. They describe their belief in empowerment and inspiration of women of all ages, sizes, shapes, races, etc. And they are leveraging dance and theater as a catalyst in which to do that work. Their goal is to build self-esteem and self-worth within the community by meeting women where they are and providing opportunities that do not require them to participate as, quote, professionals in the dance arena. They are looking to elevate education around health and wellness in this space, and also to facilitate relationship building between diverse women. Their project concept is as follows. They are seeking to create a piece of material that encompasses the pathways of dance and theater while speaking to women's empowerment and social justice. They also secondarily hope to achieve through their work an outcome that allows for the reduction of ignorance, cancellation of racism, and the eradication of low self-esteem. So first, I think I want to say, and forgive me, you all, thank you for your patience, because everybody knows I was in the wrong place. 1 second. I felt that this artist, in creating this unit, it's called the Hundreds Unit, creating this unit where my understanding was they do dance performances and kind of activations throughout the city, sometimes at sporting events, sometimes kind of flash mob style, just out in the community. And my reflection was that both the videos shared and also the pictures demonstrate that this particular art form has created a sense of home for people that's really powerful and profound. My challenge with what this artist presented is that it's very clear what they have been able to do in the past. It's very clear the impact of what they've been able to do in the past. I encourage them to be really clear about what they mean when they say, quote, a piece of material that they will produce, how that will look differently than what it is that they produced before, and what specifically that will look like.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
I just wanted to highlight that I appreciated the artist stating that the impact, highlighting the impact of bringing people into the same space, and how just having people in the same space can be so transformative for community. I thought that was a powerful statement. It makes me feel like the spirit in which the artist is approaching this project is that of community. So.
Right. Okay, now 295, and that's also you, Rachel.
I figured it would be, Melissa.
And I know we're going through these really quickly, and you all are dealing with, finding your place and moving on. So I appreciate your going with the flow here, but we're good. We'll take our time.
All righty, so 295, multidisciplinary arts, and then pathway, social impact. This artist, in their statement, describes themselves as an immigrant brown woman living in the US, a feminist scholar, and an emerging storyteller. And they share that their artistic vision is truly inspired from their own lived experience and that of those around them. They mentioned that they'd like to see an increase in representation of stories that often go untold by South Asian immigrants, and so their art is grounded here. And that they believe strongly in accessibility, trust, compassion, equity, and inclusivity. They are looking to do three things, or their artist approach outlines 3 things, actually 5, but I'm just going to give you a few. Offering a variety of accessible media. 2, encouraging their audience to talk back to them in a way that they feel comfortable doing. The proposed project has a couple phases, and I'm going to try to keep it very short. Part A, collect and document the stories of South Asian immigrant women and non-gender conforming individuals. Part B, use that storytelling to address the challenges around gender, sexual health, intimacy, reproductive justice, and the taboo and stigma that often surround those issues within the South Asian community. Part C, shed light on these same untold struggles around sexual and reproductive health that folks encounter when they identify as South Asian and non-binary. I also wanted to share, relative to this artist, one moment. I shared that I'm refreshed by the specificity with which they outline who their audience is and who they're focused on. I also enjoyed the way in which the images that they presented gave us a particular lens. It was very clear to me how they would go about doing this project. I didn't have any specific constructive feedback, so I'm excited to hear what the rest of the panel has to say. I enjoyed the specificity, and the way in which they are being very clear about what it is that they seek to do with this project.
Anyone want to add their comments or a comment?
I was impressed that I felt the subject matter is sensitive and heavy, but they approached it in a really thoughtful, understanding way that would help sort of translate these stories and these personal experiences just really thoughtfully. This could be approached, I think, without less intention. And I felt the artist did a really good job with how they outlined how they were going to navigate that.
Thank you. Okay, you can finalize your scores. And next is 286, and that will also be Rachel.
I think this is what happens when you try to be an A+ student and you try to show off, then you end up in the wrong spot. So I have learned my lesson. Okay.
Very good.
So again, applicant 286, the discipline is craft and the pathway is creation. In their artistic statement, this artist shares their first artwork actually was not, so this artist is focused on jewelry making and creation of, as we talked about, craft, but their first artwork was actually storytelling, and that focus and kind of birth of artistry in the realm of storytelling then allowed for them to make this bridge into the world of jewelry making and mixed media art, where they reside now. Their work expands the field of jewelry making and mixed media by connecting symbolism and language to address interiority and also identify common stories that we experience as part of the human condition. They also shared that their mixed media art production and jewelry making is heavily informed by an ancestral legacy of Nigerian brass artisans. Relative to their project concept, three-part as well. Yep, three-part. They shared that with the funds, first thing, they'd like to create a collection comprising jewelry, sculpture, and mixed media portraits. Second, they would like to leverage these creations to increase attention on the mental health needs of marginalized communities. And then third, they named that generational trauma is at the root of many of the things, the scars, the wounds that we carry. And they seek to connect those stories with sacred practices and engage community around what those practices are. My feedback to this artist: their pieces are beautiful, so I shared that I would certainly buy them. They're really gorgeous pieces, and I wanted to make sure to say that. The way I was intrigued by the way in which this artist creates beautiful things, and that can be seen readily when you look at their pieces, but also that they describe what they do in an equally beautiful way, and that felt important to mention. I would have liked to see this artist, as I actually gave feedback to a couple artists to this end, when providing, when talking about art that is creation-based, that is influenced by a historical moment or a particular experience, to make sure that they include something in their work samples that helps the readers and the audience to understand what that connection is, so that it's not just being understood to be beautiful jewelry. If there's a much broader and more profound story beneath it, I don't want us to miss the story because we were not involved in the creation process. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional thoughts? Okay, then finalize your score, and next, this is your last in a row, Rachel, 283.
I knew, John, when you got all those in a row, my time was going to come. Should have been prepared for that.
We're going to get to a point where there are just two of you, and we might just go back and forth so that you don't get stuck doing them one after the other.
It's all good. As long as there's patience, it's all good. So There, for this artist, 283, the discipline is music and the pathway is creation. This artist shares, they write music to process shared experiences of joy, ecstasy, heartbreak, and grief. And they feel most fulfilled by sharing their music to foster human connection and healing through projects that promote community. I'm going to speak about that, Lula, in a second. They write songs about hard topics. The focus is uplift and kind of responding to the cultural moment. They also mentioned that capoeira is an influence in some of the work and in some of the music that they do. So I noted that as well and brought that knowledge into my assessment. Their project concept, so they describe wanting to write 12 new songs that they will take and flesh out with more instrumentation, more vocal production, etc. And that the tangible outcome is an album that they will then stream and distribute at a listening party. And the theme really is, how are they taking hardship and turning that into beautiful music that can be enjoyed by community? Feedback that I gave this artist, and then I want to expound on just a couple things. I celebrated this artist's courage in taking tough topics and being willing to tackle them through music. That is not easy. And also I celebrated their willingness to invite others into the fold to do that work with them and to share their platform. On the constructive side, I think one of the challenges perhaps that folks that submit in the music category are going to encounter, maybe more than others, is the way in which I think, and Lula, I called you out because I know you're always focusing us on the community piece. I think that when one is producing an album and wanting to create an album of songs and of music that is significant to them, sometimes it's very hard to make that connection to why it is also significant to community. And I would have liked to see this artist, recognizing that it's challenging, I would have liked to see this artist make a very clear connection as to how their lived experience is relevant to community and would engage community meaningfully.
I appreciate you saying that, Rachel. I just want to ride on that wave with that same energy and add that that's something that stood out to me as well when I was reading this application. And even, I think I spoke earlier about another application that spoke about unhoused individuals. And then there was one where the woman was saying that, you know, East African subjects inspired her or something. I think sometimes folks need to be like really deliberate with every word when they are citing very triggering social issues as the inspiration for a work, because we're not in that artist's head. And, you know, they could be a very sensitive approach that they have envisioned in their head. And I try to give that benefit of the doubt every time I read an application, but unless it's spelled out, there is opportunity for like some kind of subjective interpretation that might not be as sensitive and can start to seem maybe like it might harm community. So I say all that to say, I don't mean to put all of that only on this applicant, but it definitely, when you say George Floyd, when you say Uvalde shooting, these are things that when some people hear them, have very emotional reactions. So I think more detail about how those topics will be engaged within the work, almost maybe even overly detailed, is better than not when talking about something. So anyway, that's why I brought that same energy up with other applicants. But I do want to say something really positive about this application as well. I love that the applicant is self-taught and started learning at an older age. Shout out to that. And thank you for pointing that out in your application. I thought that was great. So.
Great, thank you. Thank you all. Okay. Submit your scores. And the next one is 281. Lula.
Yes, 281, the discipline is dance, the secondary is media arts, and the pathway is social impact. So the proposed project will be a 5 to 10 minute dance piece that tells the unique story of 4 individuals who are strangers to one another, but not to the day-to-day nuances we face in this world. And I won't read through the whole thing, but in the project concept, as you all saw, there's very specific detail about each of the 4 characters and what day-to-day nuances they're facing in the world as far as discrimination, and within their community. So each dancer represents a different ethnic origin, economic status, and social challenge. A videographer will capture the dance piece. The final project will premiere in the Oak Park community at the Guild Theater. The premiere will include a motivational speaker, a panel discussion, ambassadors, information ambassadors, tabling, in an effort to bring awareness to community services and resources, which hints at partnerships with CBOs. Artists will host 4 Brave Space community meetings to engage the community as well. So I'm sure you will not be surprised. One of my comments is obviously that this project relies heavily on community interaction, and the project concept does detail some opportunities for community interaction, like the Brave Space community meetings, and also the panel discussions, and even the day of event having community services and resources. So all of that is powerful. And so I felt positive and opportunity for improvement with this point, that there could have been more detail. I think a lot of applicants cite that they have relationships with CBOs, or that they know exactly which CBOs they want to work with. But to the point that has been brought up before by some of y'all as well, like, have those relationships been made? And just because the relationship exists doesn't mean that that community will for sure be incorporated in the project in an effective way. So a little bit more detail would help, but I did feel that this applicant gave more detail than most. And then the other thing was that the project concept is multifaceted and engages in cross-sector exploration, health, gender discrimination, racism, and the diversity of issues the project addresses was definitely a strong point. So I really enjoyed this application and scored very highly.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
My
Yeah.
only, oh, sorry, go ahead,
Go
John.
ahead. No, go ahead.
My only concern, I appreciated like all the programming components that followed the performance, but a 5 to 10 minute piece, I felt like there's so much narrative here, and there's so much sort of like character development that I kind of thought that the performance itself could be expanded upon. But you know, I'm not a choreographer, so I can't really say you know how that would be developed further, but I just felt like I would have liked to maybe it to, and you know, this is just like a project proposal, so theoretically the piece, the dance, the final performance could be longer than that, but I just thought there's so much content here. I would have loved to see that sort of built out further.
Yeah, I agree on that too, the length of the piece, but overall I felt it was a strong application from an experienced artist that addresses some of the most pressing issues of our time. So,
Thank
and it's
you.
a good sample too.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to 269. Kara?
Okay, 269. The primary discipline is visual arts. The secondary discipline is multidisciplinary arts, and the pathway is creation. This artist is trained in traditional Chinese art as well as Western approaches to art. And the artist has endured several different economic, social, and political circumstances, which reflect on the strength and limitations of perspectives permitted by these experiences. The project they're proposing is titled Flowers from the Sky, and it is their response to how the COVID-19 pandemic has altered our lives. While we are still facing the hardship of losses due to the virus, we are also facing the rising hate crime towards Asians. The artist feels that they are living in two realities. One is the deadly virus, and one is the racial hatred towards the artist because of the color of their skin. The project will include 100 small paintings executed in traditional Chinese painting techniques. The materials used are watercolor with Chinese ink on Chinese cotton paper. Each work will include the iconic image of the plum blossom, which signifies auspiciousness and the abundance in Asian culture. So my thoughts on this proposal was that it was really thoughtful, timely. I thought it was well thought out from start to finish and held a unique perspective and approach in contemporizing traditional Chinese painting techniques. The artist has a clear professional track record of education, which would assist with the community engagement components as outlined in the proposal. I didn't reference that. I apologize. The artist wanted to hold programs on both the campuses of UC Davis and CSU Sacramento, where the artist has taught for more than 20 years. These would be after school programs for students of the Chinese Services Center. So I thought that their background sort of proved that they would be successful in teaching those. And yeah, I thought this was a really thoughtful and strong proposal. And I thought the work samples included were really strong.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, I have a few. Again, it's a little discrepancy. The artist did not provide descriptions to the work samples shown, but they do not show a lot of Asian or Chinese influence, nor do I believe that they're done in the traditional mediums as she described with these plum blossoms. So I just felt that it would have helped to match again, see some of her work in the traditional way that she had described.
Thank you. All right, you can submit your scores. Thank you. And we'll move on to also Kara 265.
Okay, number 265. This artist's primary discipline is visual arts, secondary discipline is media arts, and their pathway is creation. The artist, their artwork draws on their Filipino and American identity, viewing the world through a bicultural lens. They are interested in questioning and examining identity and the relationship that they have with the world around. The project concept is brief, using the creation pathway and video as my medium for creative expression. The artist plans to produce a documentary examining different perspectives on aging and the role that art plays in the lives of their subjects, who are elderly artists. The artist will follow their lives throughout a year as they deal with physical or mental challenges, maintaining an art practice and navigating the need to stay relevant. While I appreciate the concept of this, the overarching concept, I thought the proposal was somewhat lackluster. What I just read was pretty much 50% of the proposal. So there really wasn't a lot of insight on how the grant or how the proposal would hit on any of the grant guidelines. I was really kind of upset or bummed out to see that, because I really thought that there was a really strong start and had a lot of potential there. The artist's work samples were really strong. However, and so I have a lot of faith that the artist would be able to execute this project, but I just felt like the proposal itself didn't hit on the grant guidelines and wasn't fully fleshed out to allow for me to fully understand how they would do, how the project would be executed with regard to what we were asking with the grant guidelines.
Yeah,
Oh, go ahead, John.
okay. Yeah, I second that. And my comments were the proposed project is very short on detail, purpose, selection, method of interview, and what will happen with the end product.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other comments, you can submit your score. And we're going to move to 260, and that would be John introducing.
Okay. This is under the discipline of folk art, and the pathway is creation. says with the money from this grant, I like to create a minimum of 45 to 50 regalia items. And then there's a number of things that I could probably even announce. The majority of these items will be gifted to the youth and elders involved in the Aztec dance tradition in the Sacramento area. I like to offer several workshops to youth and family interested in learning to create their own items. This is in line with my previous history of creating and gifting these items, as well as teaching the skills involved. So the applicant has been active in the area for some time and very generous spirited. So these items are made really to continue sort of cultural preservation, as well as the culture around Aztec dancing, regalia, rituals, etc. And I like the generous spirit of the project in providing free items, free regalia to youth in encouragement of their position, exploration and cultural identity, family, solidarity, and artistic expression. So others can come in on that.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything they would like to add? Okay, if there are no additional comments, then make sure your scores are submitted. Just so that you know, the rest of the applications are going to be led by both Kara and Rachel. This is just the way it worked out. And for anybody who's listening, we've had 2 days of reviews and there are an equal number of introductions by panelists, but these just happened to fall on the second day. So we did spread it more equitably throughout the 2 days. So I'm just thinking that maybe we could just, rather than go in the order I have, maybe go back and forth so that one of you isn't just constantly moving to the next. Does that work for the two of you as introducers?
I don't really mind. I have my notes on one side, so I can go in order or whatever you want, Rachel.
Okay, let's maybe try to like go back and forth and give each of you like a little moment to collect yourself. So Carrie, you're next with number 259.
Cool. Okay, so applicant number 259, their primary discipline is visual arts. Second discipline is media arts. Their pathway is social impact. The artist, all of the concepts of the artist's work are centered around community, home, and connection. They come from a second generation Spanish speaking household, and that the language barrier between the artist and previous generations has become a catalyst in creating work that preserves stories and histories that would otherwise be lost. They also have a background in mixed media, experimental media as well. The project was really interesting. So here's the overview of the concept. This project is best simplified as a skateboarding collective, but contains so much more potential than that. If funded, this time would be used not only to deeply explore design and illustration concepts for skateboards and apparels, but would also focus on how to hold workshops, events, and offer free material for emerging artists and skaters to engage with the work and with each other. They also mentioned about how there is rich body of skaters and creators in the community, but no female or queer-based companies and very few community events for people in the skate world that aren't men. So I thought that, the foundation of this was really interesting. It was really unique within the overall applicant pool. I enjoy the innovation behind the concept of establishing a collective of individuals through the lens of visual arts, and that sort of parallel with visual arts into the skateboarding community. I like that the artist is uplifting a marginalized community specifically within the niche community of skateboarding. I'm not saying that skateboarders necessarily are marginalized, but the marginalized community within skateboarding. Yeah, so I thought that there was a lot of really good stuff here, but I felt like there might be a few holes in the proposal regarding the final outcome. It was kind of ambiguous and vague at times. I felt like there were context clues that really sort of brought me almost there, but overall it could have been fleshed out a little bit more. One thing that kind of I thought countered that were that the artist had some pretty strong work samples, which made me believe that they had a skill set to execute this concept. They might need a little guidance. However, it appears that they have mentors in the community that they could lean on to assist. But overall, I thought it was interesting, but I kind of needed a little bit more specificity within the project concept.
Thank you. Anyone want to add anything to that? Okay. If there are no other comments, then I'll move over to Rachel and application number 250.
Thank you, Melissa. So again, applicant 250, discipline is music and media arts. The pathway is creation. And I won't take too much time, but I have a lot to say about this artist. This is an emerging artist that, you know, my heart felt something toward in a particular way. So let me share first what was in the artist statement. So the artist opens by saying, I don't see myself as an artist. I feel like that word is reserved for the best of the best. I have personal feelings about that. And what I want to communicate to the panel is that this artist is someone who I think has found a way to be very humble in the way that he shares his art. And I want him to hold on to that as long as he can, and has kind of married music and also social interaction and made them kind of an art form onto themselves in a particular capacity, which I was intrigued by. I found that this artist, again, while an emerging artist, the work sample that was shared was very compelling. I thought the music was interesting. I thought it covered some interesting topics around growing up, around mental health. A lot more to be developed there, a lot more to be built out for this artist, just in terms of approach and in terms of perhaps understanding of their art form, but the foundation is there. And I wanted to make sure that I said that piece. Again, I was really intrigued by the way in which this artist has found a way to bring music and kind of community building and social interaction together in a one-to-one capacity. The feedback that I gave this artist brings full circle where I started relative to the artist statement. My encouragement to this artist is to fully embody what it means to be an artist as he is going through his process of self-development. Relative to the application, bringing more work samples, making sure that there's a very clear understanding of the impact that he wants to have through his art. But I think he's off to a great start, and I found it underdeveloped, but beautiful.
Any other thoughts?
I agree. I thought there was a lot of really nice content here. I really don't want anybody to sell themselves short. You know, I feel like taking the initiative and writing this grant proposal and putting yourself out there it's hard to do. And owning it is so important. You know, I think that will really take them to the next level. And I think that would really help with their work growth as well. So my notes were to never sell yourself short, especially when writing a grant proposal. So
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Finalize those scores, and then we'll move back to 258, which is Kara.
Okie dokie. 258, the primary discipline is visual arts, the secondary discipline is folk arts, and the pathway is creation. Excuse me. The artist is a ceramic artist of Puerto Rican and Mexican descent. Their work represents an exploration of tradition without being limited to that same tradition. They do not seek to replicate tradition, and because they do not think that they are solely who their past is. They're presenting work using modern techniques and materials struggling with modern themes. The project concept is to create a new body of work focused on using modern techniques and materials, fusing traditional imagery and ideas. The artist will create larger, complex forms with redefined traditional imagery. I really thought that the artist's work samples were really beautiful, and that the artist's statement and overall project needed to hit on a few more of the grant guidelines to be a successfully funded project. I thought that there was a good bit of missing information within the concept. You know, it was a lot of describing the work, but less about how it would relate to the grant guidelines. For example, there was no venue where the project would take place. We didn't know how many pieces the artist would be creating, at what scale, who will be impacted by it, and who the audience was, and what type of community engagement would be. So I felt like, there was a lot of really good information, but just kind of missed the mark on some of the grant guidelines.
Thank you. Any additional thoughts? Okay, we can score. And now move to number 229, which is Rachel.
Thank you. So again, applicant 229, the disciplines are visual art and multidisciplinary arts, and the pathway selected is social impact. So this artist describes creating works on paper, video installations that are fueled by his love of drawing and mark making, as he calls it. He's created what he calls a series of drawing projects, where kind of the philosophical approach to his art is navigating the constant tension that exists between control and loss of control. Relative to the project concept, so it's two pieces that have been outlined here. One, he shares that funding will support, as I said, two projects. One, what he calls the FAM, Free Art Materials Stand, and the Portable Printmaking Lab, where folks from the community can come and engage. And actually it is one of those pieces is a trailer that travels around, and folks can engage as the trailer moves around throughout the community. And then the second piece involves, there's an intersection with the DEI committee of an organization established called Axis. And this is a piece where I wanted to see where the artist was going. My understanding was that his focus was, how can I allow this art and the community that is created kind of de facto through this art to then allow for pathways into conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion, which could make sense. The feedback that I gave to this artist was in that vein. The first piece, the celebratory piece, is just having a really beautiful vision for what it looks like to allow your art to give way to other things and to create even tighter community. In the spirit of what Lula reminds us of constantly, the how is very important when you're talking about community connection through art. And so specifically, I wanted this artist to clarify in the application, and I didn't see it present, but I encourage this artist for future applications to be really clear about who he can strategically partner with, perhaps to facilitate those conversations, or perhaps CBOs who are already doing that work like Axis, making it very clear what the partnership will look like, versus it just being, there is a partnership possible, but it's yet undefined. I think the reader needs to understand what the specific project is, what the collaboration will look like.
Other comments? Okay, we can move to number 238, which is Karen.
Okay. We are on number 238. The primary discipline is craft, and the pathway is performance and presentation. Let's see here. The artist is a master candle maker and certified aromatherapist. And they've made candles for over 20 years. The project concept, the artist will create a candle making class that celebrates the life of honeybees, which will be open to the Oak Park community and everyone else interested. They'll be creating 3 different types of candles. Fragrances will be mostly flowers pollinated by bees. In addition, they will invite a local beekeeper to speak about beekeeping and how bees are vital to their ecosystem. They will also make pizza with the brick oven at the Brick House Gallery and Art Complex in Oak Park with an emphasis on food pollinated by bees. I thought that this was a fun proposal. I thought it was unique. Consider in the overall applicant pool, no one else is working with candles. I don't believe there was anybody else who integrated food into their project concept as well. I thought that the artist has clearly mastered their craft as outlined in the work samples and their resume and history. My concerns, though, is that I feel like this could be a lot more than just a one-night workshop. I think that in order for it to be really a successful proposal, it would need to be developed a little bit further and hear more about the intended community engagement, especially following the workshop, and how this would sort of leave an impact on those that it reached.
Any other thoughts? Comments?
I agree with everything you said, Kara. I felt so strongly for this one for the reasons you brought up. There's nothing else working with candles and the food, how bees were incorporated in the environment, and it's just so unfortunate because I feel like that would have been something that would have pushed this application, over. I feel like is having a stronger, because they mentioned educating the community. They also mentioned not introducing, but working with 3D printing for candles as like a unique approach that they have in the craft. So it's like the pieces are there, but what is the impactful thing that is going to happen, beyond the creation of candles? So yeah, I'm with you.
Yeah, I also thought that how would this class be different from other classes that had been offered in the past? And there's not too much detail on the actual project in terms of numbers of students, and what the impact would be and how long the duration of these classes.
Thank you. Great, thank you. Okay, finalize your scores, and then we will move to number 229, which is Rachel.
Thank you.
Oh, no, wait a minute. I'm sorry. You did 225. I'm sorry, you did 229, 225.
Thank you. To the panel and community, I apologize. There's a gang of parrots that fly by every day at 2:30. This is their moment. So forgive me if they're loud. So this is applicant 225. As was stated, disciplines are visual arts and multidisciplinary arts. This artist is focused on fashion, and not just fashion as we know it necessarily, but sustainable fashion, and talks a lot about the way in which, and knows a lot clearly about the way in which fast fashion is something that is causing strain, to say the least, on our ecosystem, on our environment, and is focused on addressing that head on in what they produce, but also encouraging community to do the same. They talk a lot about what are they call them the right materials, and materials that will not put, as mentioned, that strain on the environment. Relative to the project concept, this artist has dubbed themselves Sacramento's sustainable stylists, which I thought was cute. the way that they want to impact community through this work and through their talents are, as they describe, bringing awareness and ideas to show the consumer how to save the earth and their pockets by using discarded textiles and incorporating them into fashion and art. I love the concept here. I love the way in which this artist is focused, not just on creating something beautiful, but really thinking about longevity and thinking about impact on environment. What I would have liked to see in the feedback that I gave this artist was I'd like to see them, because they're talking about hosting fashion shows and doing education, to not just have community in the room, but also think about a very clear call to action that they can give community so that the impact of their art, the sustainability focus of their art is felt in kind of a resounding way. It's beautiful for people to come and be educated about something that's highly important, and what is the next step and how can the community move forward with the knowledge that they attain.
Thank you. John? You look like you're going to say something.
No.
Okay. I saw your hand. Okay, does anyone else have anything they want to add? Okay, then we are going to move back to Kara, and the application is 236.
Okay. Applicant 236, their primary discipline is visual arts and their pathway is creation. Let's see. Their artwork best comes from personal emotions and experiences that have a powerful statement. Their artwork symbolizes a journey of their life that represents events, surroundings, human emotion, and experiences. Their work has grown stylistically and in size. They work with developing their own style paint strokes that represent patchworks, splash painting, spray paint. And they talk about their interest in painting faces of the human emotion through experiences with their personal life, places they've traveled, volunteering in Africa, world events, and influential people within the 21st century. The project concept is as stated. The artist plans on hosting an art exhibition that is dedicated to human emotions, specifically regarding mental health and the struggles that we as humans experience. I'll be curating an art exhibition that showcases the artist's ability to express feelings and emotions towards mental health. The artist will be creating 8 paintings that demonstrate a high degree of artistic skill, balance, line form, color, hue, value, and signify a message of mental health. The artist talks about challenges within the community like during the pandemic. They mentioned the war in Ukraine, George Floyd, the mass shootings, especially with regard to mental health and how those are affected. And they also talk about, their personal mental health, but how others are experiencing it as well. So, I thought that there was a lot here. And I was kind of confused almost in a way. I really thought the work itself was strong and that the artist has a very unique, beautiful aesthetic. But I wasn't really sure how they were going to make these statements through their work. They seem like they're beautiful portraits at the moment. And I sort of lost this correlation of their project intention with their work samples that they included and trying to visualize how this would be executed. Also, I was curious about the specifics, where will this show take place? How do they generate audiences? And, how are they going to address this issue of mental health in a educational, informative collaborative way. I think that Rachel brought up something really interesting that I've been adding into my proposals is, the presence of some kind of mental health professional to help sort of steward this conversation. I think that there's a lot here, but to me, it just kind of there's some disconnects between the proposal and the artwork and sort of how it would all come to fruition.
I agree. I also felt that there was a disconnect. I had a hard time wrapping around what exactly this artist was saying that they can do and do well and have experience in and will do with this project. I felt like it all didn't flow. I also am very sensitive to language that suggests extractive artistry. I think that especially in this time, I mean, it's become a fad, especially since 2020, but like in this time, especially, people should be aware of like how they express their exposure to things that then they choose to create art about. And so again, this artist talks about, I believe the exact quote is, I traveled to Africa's largest slums and volunteered and then came back and produced an artwork. And it's like, that to me sounds like very extractive language. I'd like to know, I mean, that is a big thing to say in one sentence and just kind of put out there, and without much context comes off very cliche, old school. I went to Africa and saw some sadness and came back and drew about it kind of. And I apologize for being that direct, but I just feel that I took that into strong consideration when considering what the artist would do with this project. So
yeah, I actually have a note that touches on that as well. And
yeah,
it also doesn't really seem relevant to the project either. So it's like sort of
exactly
performative almost in a way. I don't really know why
Thank you.
it's included. Yeah.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I want to echo some of that. Uncertain whether the subjects/portraits will be based on interviews of others, like of those people, or are they self-created by the artist? And also would be helpful to know more about the size and the media where this art, the project will be based. Again, some of us are curators and directors of museums, and we're rather concerned about, the practicalities of, whether something is on oil, acrylic, the size, its condition, whether it's outside, indoor, all these things are very important. And the more answers we have, the less doubt we will have about your project.
So Melissa, you're on mute.
First time I mute myself and it doesn't work. All right, thank you all. We're going to move to 220, Rachel.
Thank you. Applicant 220. Discipline music, pathway creation. This particular artist, as stated, is a musician, and the focus is, my understanding is combating racism, addressing racism, promoting inclusivity in response to the present moment and the present state of race relations in this country. The artist talks about, his inspiration, the way in which he believes songwriting delivers powerful messages and has the ability and he didn't say that, the ability to create change, and cites a couple different examples of what has inspired him in that vein. For the project itself, the artist will work with his band to compose and professionally record and produce 7 original songs, all intended to fight against racial injustice and deliver messages of peace, love, and equality. The feedback that I gave to this artist, I enjoyed his music. I thought it was beautiful. He's clearly very talented. In the same vein, and this is coming from someone who's also a musician and struggles with this, and so I want to make sure I say that out loud. There's solidarity here in this feedback. When we are creating an album, when we're creating a piece of music, it's clear how music that is intended to combat racism and to push back against injustice can impact a wide variety of people. I always want to encourage artists along with myself to take the next step and establish how is there dialogue that's going to be involved? What is the way that the artist will know pretty much how the audience has received, and what is the next step? What is now the responsibility of the audience having heard this music, and how was the music designed to imbue them with that responsibility and make clear that they intend for them to carry this forward. Not easy to do, but important.
Any additional?
Yeah, it's really interesting to think about, Rachel. Especially with this proposal, it's so much, there have to be, like you said, like action items almost as for the viewer or listener. What kind of engaged interaction are we having here? But from more of like a zoomed out perspective, I thought especially music is not my medium, my specialty, but I thought the overall work sample composition was really powerful and beautiful. So, empowering this artist to consider engagement following the composition, production, I think that it could be something strong to consider. But I thought the work sample included was really strong and beautiful, and interested sort of thinking about it in a couple different ways now.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move to number 234. Kara?
One second. 234. Okay, so the applicant number 234, their primary discipline is visual arts and their pathway is creation. The artist is a printmaker, advocate, and educator. They create a visual narrative with animals and symbolism that are representative of life, death, and loss. The artist seeks to facilitate space through their artwork, for the viewer to relate to the natural world and to induce introspection. The project concept: the artist will create a sequence of linocuts exploring composition and space on a larger scale, which requires having a diversity of carving tools, materials, studio rental, and an estimated 112 hours per artwork. The artist wants to carve linoleum ranging in sizes, using different methods to achieve prints. They will document the process from the beginning to end. They will share their artistic process by inviting inquiries and discussion and inspiring people to pursue printmaking to tell their own stories. My thoughts were that the work samples the artists included were incredible, really, really strong work samples. The artist has clearly mastered the medium, but I was having a hard time connecting the proposal to the grant guidelines. Aside from creating an extensive body of work which relates directly to the artist statement, it seems a little disconnected from the grant guidelines. No mentions of community engagement, doesn't take place in a disinvested community, no connection to amplify the experience of historically marginalized communities. So yeah, I get that this would be a well-funded proposal in terms of artistic merit, but with regard to the grant guidelines, I think it fell short.
Any additional thoughts? Okay, complete your scores, and we're going to move on to 205, Rachel.
Thank you. I'll take 60 seconds to do this before I get to 205. Kara, what you said about the last applicant, my brain was going on and on about it. And I wanted to make sure I say for the record, because I know this is being recorded, that I think there is some projection perhaps in the feedback that I gave. And it brings up this concept of like, does art have to do all the work in a process? And the answer is no. Someone can produce an album that is focused on combating racism, et cetera, and it can stand alone and be deeply impactful. I wanted to make sure I said that for the record, and it was beautiful, so know that too. On to, where am I at? 205, thank you. disciplines for this applicant: music and media arts. The pathway is social impact. There's a lot to say about this particular submission. This was, I don't know if that's appropriate. I was going to say this was one of my favorites. I already said it, so I had to commit to it. I found this artist's take on how to leverage hip hop and how to leverage one's personal story for the benefit of others, not only intriguing, but I think deeply profound. I'm someone who enjoys hip hop a lot, and I felt like he has a particular talent in this domain. Talent is one thing, vision is another thing. And so I was really kind of, I just thought it was magnificent that this particular applicant was able to marry talent that has clearly been developed, but also vision for community empowerment. This artist talks about being a conscious hip hop artist and also names himself as an educator that strives to inspire and empower as many youth and communities as possible by working on, anti-bullying assemblies in K through 12 schools, conducting workshops on hip hop, et cetera. And again, his focus is teaching youth and communities alongside youth the importance of making right, which can be looked at in a number of different ways, right and wise decisions, treating each other with respect, and being positive leaders within the community. Relative to the project concept, this artist would take the funding and host 8 anti-bullying assemblies within K through 12 schools and 5 workshops that address inner city issues impacting youth within the community. And then also speaks about hosting a culminating community empowerment concert at a particular venue in Oak Park. My feedback to this artist was much of what I said. I think he's very talented. I think he has an extraordinary vision and shows a lot of vulnerability in his work. As we've been talking about the entire time, my direct constructive feedback is what is the outcome of the community engagement, and how do we know that it's been impactful and effective from the artist standpoint?
Thank you. Additional comments?
I second a lot of what you said, Melissa.
I didn't say it, she said it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rachel. I'm sorry. We've done a few of these. My brain is a little.
We will take a break shortly.
No, Rachel, I second a lot of what you said. And I really loved the work sample. I really loved what the artist has accomplished in their, career and what they've outlined in their statement. I just thought it was so unique, using hip hop as a catalyst for anti-bullying education. I just thought it was like a feel-good project. It was interesting and unique and well executed in terms of, what this artist can take on. I really enjoyed this proposal.
I want to third everything that y'all have said, Rachel and Kara and Melissa, and all of you. I'm trying really hard not to comment unless I have something unique and different to add, but I was so moved by this application for all the reasons that both of y'all highlighted. I just wanted to just throw that out there, that I really believe that this is one of the strongest ones, and I really enjoyed the work sample as well.
Well, since everybody said something, I'd be remiss. I just mentioned that bullying affects education and both mental and physical health. This well thought out proposal by an experienced artist seems to offer solutions. But I do agree, how do you measure outcome, after you had this? And I'm not sure there is, measurement of outcome, but the fact that this is brought out to the open, and this is something that has to be dealt with, I think will give people, the preparedness to, be able to counter some of these. Yeah, so kudos.
Thank you all. Okay, we're going to move to number 231. Kara?
All right, so applicant number 231, their primary discipline is visual arts, and their pathway is performance presentation. A little bit about from their artist statement. the artist uses a teaching philosophy which incorporates DIY ethic, which is critical for survival as an artist. They surround themselves with other artists and professionals who are smarter and more experienced than they are. I hate that I just read that because I think, again, as we mentioned, never undervalue yourself. But I think that what they're implying is that they like to surround themselves by printmakers who inspire them and force them outside of their comfort zone and to learn new techniques. They are an educator. They work with teenagers specifically and want to empower young people to have a voice and be able to express themselves in creative, constructive ways. The project concept is to build a mobile screen printing trailer / cart that can be attached to a bicycle to carry necessary supplies and provide workshops at community centers, pop-up events, Capitol Park events, protests, after school, summer programs throughout Sacramento. The workshops develop a social infrastructure of artists who can channel their passion into constructive form like t-shirts or posters. They go into a little bit about how the funds will be used with regard to concept development, figuring out the messaging, the imagery that they're going to develop for these screens. They talk a little bit about the stencil workshop that they'll be creating, how they'll make it, as well as a screen printing workshop, which would include all the materials. My thoughts on this was that I just really enjoy the concept of an overarching concept of a mobile print shop and the intentionality of educating youth using this medium. We have seen a couple of these proposals through, I think there was like a handful of people who were talking about a mobile screen printing lab, which, they're all different. So I think that, taking each one into account and how it is executed and is important. So I'm being nitpicky here, but thinking about how the artist has put a lot of intention into like the breakdown of what this program, I guess, would include, but I think that we're missing specifics. The artist mentions those, we're going to be set up at community centers, pop-up events, Capitol Park events, after school, blah blah, etc. Sorry, but where, which ones, what parts of the community, what parts of the city, what types of students are you trying to engage with, which neighborhoods, who are these people, who are these schools, let's learn a little bit more specific. And yeah, I think that there's a lot more that could be included into this proposal to make it a little bit more beefy, and to hit on the grant guidelines. It's all there. I just think that it just should have been fleshed out a little bit more.
Any other thoughts? Okay, if we could do one more, and then does everybody need a break after that? Just a little break. Okay, one more. Rachel, 194.
Thank you. Applicant 194. Discipline is visual arts. Pathway is creation. And this artist talks about kind of sets up what their art is by talking about working in a corporate job and the way in which that had a negative impact on their mental health, and that their chosen kind of way of coping, the laughter is not belittling in any capacity. I laughed because I thought it was a brilliant idea, coping by creating coloring books. And so this artist has chosen to devise some coloring books that can be beneficial to a particular audience, and cites their kind of love of taking their personal experiences and then leveraging them for other people's gain and other people's development as the foundation for this. They also cite that the ideas for the coloring book design come from nature, come from their own Asian American heritage, and from their travels globally. Project concept is as follows. As I said, they plan on publishing a coloring book for adults that is called Bite Size Worlds. fantasy world made up of creatures living out their lives in and around foods from a variety of different Eastern and Western cultures. And the goal of this particular artistic medium and the distribution of it is to help others find peace in their lives, and in particular to help other Asian women in hardship find relief from stressful life situations. They also cited, I think this is important to say, that they in the past only drew concepts that incorporated nature and animals, and they've now expanded what it is that they are creating. My feedback to this applicant, as you saw by my smile, I thought it was a great idea, and I love when folks create art in any medium that's participatory, and we've seen a lot of that over the course of the entire process. As I've said many times over the course of this this examination that we are doing, or this panel examination, continuing to encourage folks who are focused on, as this artist states, folks who have been impacted by domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. If you are not yourself an expert in supports for those particular experiences, that there is a responsibility, I think, to have folks inform what you're designing to make sure that it's trauma informed always.
Any additional comments?
I appreciated the artist pointing out that they had already started working on this. I think they hinted that mentioned that they have already talked to the CEO of the CBO that they plan to work with, and they confirmed that the collaboration, just little hints like that in the project concept that show like, I'm already on it. I'm just looking for some financial support, so anyway.
Okay, well, if you can all put your scores in, and let's take another short break. We only have 10 more to get through this afternoon, and then we can finalize everything. So maybe come back at about 3:10. Is that good for everyone?
Yep.
And we'll finish up. So thank you all. See you in about 10 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. We're coming down to the wire, so thank you all for hanging in here for a long afternoon. The next application, I believe, is 230, and that will be Kara.
Okay, diving right in. Applicant number 230, their primary discipline is visual arts and their pathway is creation. A little bit about the artist's statement. Spirituality is the inspiration and philosophy that shapes their work. They do not mean spirituality in a religious sense, but rather the feeling of having a deep connection to painting, the feeling of having a purpose, being present, connected, and alive. The project concept is outlined by the artist is that they plan to develop a new series of work that's based on and inspired by two Sacramento neighborhoods that they have lived and worked in for the past 4 years, Mansion Flats and Boulevard Park. This new body of work will be based on researching both conscious and unconscious artistic choices, or in other words, the planned and unplanned. Aspects of these work will consist of representational images taken directly from their neighborhood, as well as abstract forms. Visually, these paintings will give the viewer recognizable worlds that exist in real time, coupled with the abstract or nameless forms, both existing in the same world. The artist wants to complete 8 to 10 large-scale paintings, varying in size, and They will place them in venues which they outline in those neighborhoods that they mentioned above. I thought this was a really interesting project concept, and I appreciate the abstract nature of these paintings and work samples that are meant to depict a specific setting, giving the viewer a opportunity to sort of question place and setting, as they mentioned in their artist statement. Forcing viewer engagement and self-discovery is a challenging concept, and I think the artist is doing an interesting job with these. I think they'd be super impactful on a large scale, and really physically immersing yourself into these paintings. It's hard to tell just from a little screen of the complexity of these works, but I feel like when produced large, they could be really compelling. I do want to know more about specifics regarding the components of community engagement, because I feel like a lot of what this is, the artist is doing in this proposal, is leaving it up to the viewer to make these connections based on where they are. But I think that there could be some supplementary experiences to really kind of further and push that engagement. I think that there are some missed opportunities for connections to some of the grant components regarding the historical marginalized communities, and also some more cross-sector exploration. But, I think that there's a lot of really interesting things happening here at this proposal.
Thank you. Any additional comments? Okay, then we can move to the next application, which is going to be led by Rachel, 143.
Thank you. Application 143, primary discipline, visual arts. Pathway is creation. This artist talks about being heavily inspired by the work of, in particular, Mexican surrealists like Frida Kahlo and others, and talks about the way in which their artistic focus is to explore specific relationships between their experiences as women juxtaposed with the world that they occupy. This is a theme throughout the work, or throughout the project concept. The specific concept is to create a series of paintings and printed media that is centered around concept of gender expression. And they are, make sure to note that as a tangible outcome, they'd like to create 10 to 20 canvas paintings of varying sizes that can be converted to printed materials, such as prints, posters, or stickers. And they are also, they specifically note that the stickers are a particular effort to make sure that the work is accessible in a variety of mediums. They also talk about some CVOs that they're interested in engaging with, and to the point made by some panelists earlier, it's beautiful when artists are thinking about who they'd like to partner with, and there's not a specific organization that has been named as a secured or established partner. So that's one of the things I'd like to have this artist think about differently. The art itself, so the artist has a lot of experience presenting their art in various spaces, creating art in a number of different ways and for different reasons. The art is beautiful. I enjoy the art. I find it to be kind of, I don't know if whimsical is the word. I think some of them might fall into that category, but I find it to be very unique and beautiful. The constructive feedback that I gave this artist to that end, let me start with the celebratory feedback. Celebratory feedback I gave the artist is that it's very clear that surrealism is an influence of theirs, and there's also layers to their art. And so you can see it's not just a replication of that tradition, of that artistic tradition. They've added themselves to it in a way that I find very compelling. On the constructive side, as we've said with some other artists as well, when an artist has work samples that don't illustrate where they're bridging to, there's perhaps some other ways that they can demonstrate to a panel what it is that they are bridging to. If it's not art, perhaps it's a description, perhaps it is taking an art piece and talking about what they would change or what they would do differently. But the work samples do not quite get me there as a reviewer to understanding what the next step looks like and what the art will look like for this particular proposed project. But beautiful nonetheless.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to add was that I really enjoyed the takeaway, the physical takeaway from this, the stickers, the idea of the project kind of living on, and also how it elevated the accessibility of the project.
Okay, if there are no other comments, we'll move to number 214, and that will be Kara.
214, applicant, the primary discipline is visual arts and the pathway is performance/presentation. A little bit about the artist. The artist says that they are an intuitive artist, meaning they create work from their heart, inspired by and responding to whatever they're experiencing in that moment. Grief, heartbreak, sadness, frustration, joy, exuberance, gender expression, wonder, love, playfulness, etc. Color plays an important role in their work, as well as utilizing a variety of media to experiment and create with. The project proposal is as follows. The artist will develop the Love Notes project, working title, phone app that delivers short 1 to 5 sentences love note to subscribers who can opt out, opt into, or opt out of push notifications so that the love note appears on their mobile device notification screen at 11:11 daily. The love note will be a digital image of an actual handwritten note. Could be a Post-it note, a piece of stationery, a napkin, dry leaf, a cut art project, or whatever material is inspiring at the moment. The love notes are meant to feel like words of encouragement from a best friend or romantic partner to support the reader through whatever they're experiencing on emotional, physical, or spiritual level that day. They also go into how they will hire a local Sacramento-based app developer, inviting people to download the app for free, and that eventually app users will be able to submit their own images to be entered into the bank, which will be pulled where the random love notes will get pulled from. And then there's a following the project note as well that the community members will gather in person and or virtually one time to write short notes that they will then be placed throughout their own communities for people to discover. So my thoughts on this were that I think it's a lovely feel-good project. It has a lot of impact and touches on an array of mediums, visual arts, poetry, technology. I also love that it addresses self and community care without getting too like scientific. It's not like we're going at this from a clinical perspective. It's more just like, that sort of wellness, like self-care wave that people are riding right now, and need, I should say. I think my understanding, we don't require a budget, but I would imagine that a good bit of this grant funding would cover the developer fees, which, that again, would feed back into the community. So you can kind of take that however you want. But my worries are, what happens like technically when the project is over and the developer's term has ended and like there needs to be updates to the app. How does it live on? I worry also about accessibility. The app will only be accessible to those who have a cell phone. And also, how would people know about the app to begin with? It just all of a sudden this app appears, and it's like, how does the community even become aware that this is a thing? And I think there's some missed opportunities right there, especially with regard to accessibility in these sort of lower income promise zones and underserved communities. I think that there's kind of a miss there with that. But overall, I thought this project was sweet. And, it was an interesting way to bring art to your everyday life and for the artists to hopefully be able to impact a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree with you. I also felt this when I initially read it. It was just a very sweet, feel good, positive, just one of those like you read it and it's such a good idea and a good positive thing to put out in the community. But I also felt when reading it in line with the many other applicants that we've been reading through over several weeks, I just feel that either after listening to you speak to, I've changed my mind a little bit on this, but either there with more information, maybe it would have made a more compelling case for the necessity, or it just is not really as beautiful of a project as it is in the larger scheme of this grant and the types of things that folks are proposing. I just felt like it fell a little bit short in that context. Like there are projects pushing like large social justice movements, and then it's like an app that's going to make you feel good every day at a certain amount at a certain time in the day. It just I think it's a great idea. I just feel like in this pool it fell a little short in convincing me that it was something that needed to happen or that the community needs.
I just have a quick comment about, I think, one of the merits of this type of art is it, for me, embraces what it looks like to do the very small but revolutionary act of saying like, yes, it's one-to-one, yes, it's small, but I still see you and you still matter. And that piece I appreciated. It felt like art that was designed in service of, which resonated deeply with me.
Okay, thank you. You can finalize your scores and we will move to 138, Rachel.
Thank you. Applicant 138, primary discipline, multidisciplinary arts, pathway, performance, and presentation. This artist notes that they were born and raised in Japan, and the art form that they are displaying and that they are proposing is taiko drumming. They included a very compelling and beautiful work sample that was a video of a performance that they curated and I believe participated in. They also, in their artist statement, talked a lot about the importance of the high quality nature of the drumming of taiko, and also spent some time talking about the cost. I don't know that that's the right thing to say. I was going to say costume. Forgive me if that's incorrect. The apparel that is worn during the performance. So just for some context of what was added there, their project concept is to produce a 2-hour concert based on Japanese traditional and contemporary taiko and dance performance at the Guild Theater. They note that if the Guild is closed, they will find a different venue. So again, thinking about who could be potential partners, but there is not a partner that is noted specifically for a performance like this. I think it probably is easier than it would be for a kind of multifaceted community activation, as we've seen some other artists propose. This artist also names that the funding is especially important to create and to stage a high quality performance. Performances can be done in a variety of ways and spaces, but in order for it to be high quality, they're noting that they'd like to have lights and props and a professional sound system. And so the funding is going to support with that process, or with organizing that type of performance. The feedback that I gave to this particular artist was that I found the drumming and the accompanying music really enchanting, and it was especially enjoyable to watch the way in which all of the participants had a very clear emotional connection to what it was that they were doing. I could see it in their faces, and I enjoyed that tremendously. In terms of constructive feedback, I think the only thing that came to mind was, this is a lot of money for a 2-hour concert. It doesn't mean it should be spent. It's something that I'm thinking about. And is there an opportunity to be able to do multiple performances, perhaps in multiple different corners of Sacramento? And could that increase the impact of this beautiful art form?
Yeah, I like to add on to this comment. I mentioned that while Japanese cultural events may be experienced primarily through public Obon dances, and these are held at the Buddhist churches, there have not been many Japanese public artistic events held, especially in Black neighborhoods. I felt that this would be a good step in breaking the cultural ice. So.
Thank you. If there are no other comments, we're going to move on to 211. Kara?
Okay. Applicant 211, their primary discipline is visual arts and their pathway is social impact. A little bit about the artist from their statement. The artist is best known for their fantasy oil paintings, which blend human subjects with different species of flora and fauna. The artist is interested in the perceived separateness of humans in the natural world. They use realism to invite the viewer to suspend disbelief and fantasy to explore what it means to inhabit the human body and the body of Earth. The artist's project concept. The artist proposes a body of work composed of 8 to 10 paintings, which represent a different climate zone in the state of California, and incorporating a person or people who live in that region. The artist also says that the pieces themselves will serve to educate people about the different species of flora and fauna that exist in those parts of the state, and as a visual representation of the diversity of the state's population. The work would involve immersing themselves in these places and engaging with the people who live there in order to choose the subjects, photograph them in accordance with how they want to be seen. He also goes on to talk about the impact of like how people can travel and feel like they are connected to a city and the environment and human impact on specific environments. My thoughts on this proposal was that the artist has strong technical skill and work samples. The pieces could be very powerful if they were displayed large. I'm not sure the scale of these paintings. I enjoy the overarching concept as it addresses to sort of cross-sectoral explorations, specifically with regard to the environment. While the artist mentions they would immerse themselves into these communities to select their subjects, I want to know more about how and where, and how long are they going to stay? Are they going to interview people? Are they just going to walk the streets and introduce themselves to folks? Like, I kind of want to know a little bit more about that process, because it does seem to be very place driven. They mentioned these zones, these climate zones, but where are they going in them? And for somebody who isn't from these areas, I'm not being from California, I'm not familiar with like what cities are in these areas, and more specifics really. I also want to know more about where the work is going to be displayed, how it's going to be displayed, how they're going to connect with the community once the work is up, because I don't think that just like these sort of street style interviews are going to be that's not as much community engagement as I would like from this. I think that the project is really focused on place, but I am not really getting much with regard to the specifics of place in how the work will be finalized and then live on.
Okay, any other comments? Okay, thank you all. Moving on to number 137. I think all the rest are you gonna, Rachel, so.
Let
Not
me
that
get,
many left, though.
let me get some water. Hold on. Okay, applicant 137. Primary discipline is dance, secondary is theater, and the pathway is performance and presentation. This artist is a burlesque artist and a founder of an organization called Black Arts Matter, and is focused on, I wanted to read a particular statement, one second. Focused on using their lived experiences as a Black femme and their voice as a platform to speak out against oppression in various forms. They then go on to describe that Sacramento burlesque is not as representative of the burlesque community of the world as it should be, it could be. And most of the shows in this locale still lack diversity outside of white, thin, cis bodies. Their vision is to see the city, or to have this city see the beauty in Black burlesque by being able to showcase artists from all over. Project concept, this artist would like to bring an all Black burlesque festival to Sacramento, have it occur over multiple nights and showcase different genres within burlesque. And they name a series of different genres. They want to be able, again, they hit hard again, show a representation of bodies outside of those that are white and thin and cis. They also describe wanting the community to see the value in supporting Black artists of different mediums. And they also note that, this art form in circles is considered to be taboo and inappropriate. And they, as someone who have been in this space for quite some time, are very aware of that, that label and that understanding that is often assigned to this art form, and are committed to thinking through and have thought through very intentionally what is appropriate for children versus what is appropriate for adults. My feedback to this artist, I appreciated them, number one, sharing their art and celebrating them for being a pioneer. It takes a lot to lean into spaces where your identity is limited in its representation. My constructive thought was just needing more specifics. So the work samples provided gave a good understanding of what this could look like. I think I wanted to better understand when we talk about a festival, on what scale are we talking? They did note multiple nights. How many people are we looking to engage? How many nights is multiple nights? On what scale is this going to occur?
Any additional thoughts? Okay, thank you. Next is 132.
Thank you. Applicant 132. Primary discipline is media arts. Pathway is creation. This artist talks about the way in which it names just upfront that practices of oppression enable discrimination and limit access for people of color. And this is this artist's focus. This artist is focused on creating pieces that both educate and engage, and that extend beyond entertainment. They tell stories of influential and inspirational people of the African diaspora, and their art is designed to demonstrate excellence to help people close whatever gaps they possess in understanding the importance of racial equity. This artist also names that they combine genres and styles to create pieces that inspire reflection, combat stereotypes, and celebrate common humanity. This was a fascinating piece to engage with, or a fascinating application to engage with, because this artist brought a lot of different techniques and what it is that they presented. So those techniques include storytelling, puppetry, this very fascinating use of shadows behind what they call a scrim. I don't actually know what that means, but it looked impressive. Original narration and music, research, etc. So the work sample provided was a piece of a performance, or a portion of a performance, and it was so very clear in watching that piece that there's so much intention that goes into this work. And that was my biggest point of celebration. I love the way that this artist has made history so accessible, as we've talked about with some other artists before, but it's so clear the degree of intention that is brought to this work. That filming in silhouette, it was just kind of breathtaking for me. What this artist is proposing as their project concept is to create something connected to their previous work, but different, entitled The World According to Earl, Father-Daughter Conversations. And rather than, so this is somewhat of a departure, actually quite a departure from what it is that they've done before, they're not choosing to focus on a neighborhood of historic importance or a person of influence. They're choosing instead to go the route of telling the story of someone average, someone inspirational who achieved no fame, no fortune, no notoriety, but was able to inspire and influence quite a few people. And so they are challenging themselves to embrace something new, but what they cited as a work sample was quite brilliant and quite involved.
Anyone want to add anything to that? Okay. Next would be 121.
All right, applicant 121. One moment. Primary discipline for this applicant: music, their pathway, social impact. This artist talks first about being heavily influenced and having their art informed by the fact that they are classically trained in music, and then also their career in public health. They note that their public health experience has taught them how to think about population-based interventions, strategies for encouraging health behaviors, and the intersections between stress and disease. They also noted that they have experience in teaching, and that's something that has also very much informed their work. In their work, they combine grounding public health practices with their musical training to create innovative spaces where adults can use music to reduce and process chronic stress, and they note how prevalent that is. Their project proposal is to create an online class that's directed toward helping adults understand the science behind how and why singing is a powerful tool to manage that stress that was mentioned. They posit that their hope is that the class can provide access and understanding about the benefits that singing has for the average person, and that it will promote singing as a social and health tool rather than a talent. So this is another kind of inclusive participatory art form that we're talking about. Their work sample is right on point. It shows exactly what it would look like for them to do this, and they're proposing doing this in a different setting and perhaps in a larger and wider capacity and focused on chronic stress, as I said, because, what's that I want to say? I had two things written down here. So I noted in my feedback that this, I felt, was an ingenious way to engage folks artistically around something that's highly important. And to the feedback that I've given a couple different times, I would ask this artist to think about who else can support them to make sure that what is being discussed in the space health-wise, not because they don't have specific expertise, because they do, but I also think maybe a slight shift I would make in feedback for this artist is that when you are bringing two identities to one place, you don't have to choose. So you don't have to choose between being a public health professional and an artist, but I do think it might be helpful to have some partners in the work to hold down perhaps the public health part so that this artist can really stand in their creative self.
I appreciated the artist's connection of mental health through stress reduction and the engagement in music and singing as a, way towards peace or mental health. I really like this line. My hope is that this class will promote singing as a social and health tool rather than a talent. I just really love the perspective that this artist is bringing and this approach to, getting involved in the community with this, using this discipline. So I just like the angle the artist is coming from. I appreciated that.
Yeah, I have just a technical question. I see the person is taught, at basically sort of community settings. Teaching at City College or at least a community college requires a certificate to teach. Maybe online is a little different. So I just wanted to just mention that, whether that's already been approved.
Okay, thank you. Next, we are down to our last two applicants, applicant number 110.
It's me again, Melissa?
It is, you're the last two.
Okay. This is applicant 110, and primary discipline is literary arts. Pathway is research. This artist shares, as a creative writer, my work contributes to the burgeoning field of ecopoetics, parentheses, ecological poetry, and addresses how environmental crises shape social relations, including those between the human and the more than human world. They note having produced a book of poetry, which explains how poetry can measure dynamic realities and entangled conditions. So this is a collaboration within one artist between focus on ecological kind of social ills and also poetry. They've written a number of books, and that is the topic in each one of those books. Their project concept is to produce a book of poetry. They said tentatively titled Pipelines. It's a documentary poetics project. And the intention is to capture and represent aspects of real events and conditions and communicate them through poetry. They have noted that this is a research project for this phase of the grant because it's new and will require sustained research, which I appreciated and highlighted my appreciation in the feedback that this particular artist is really focused on making sure that what they present is accurate and sound by investing in the research component. I was so excited to read what it is that this artist had to offer, and I tried multiple times and was not able to access the work sample. I tried at different moments, I tried on different days, and I was not able to access it. So unfortunately, I could not. Melissa can access it. That's interesting. So maybe I have to go back and reattempt that, Melissa. I was not able to, and so I look forward to. And Melissa, I'll talk to you about whether or not that can be changed, but I unfortunately was not able to access it multiple times.
Okay, thanks. Any other thoughts? Okay, thank you. And we're at our last application for public review, number 21.
Okay, I'm here. Application number 21. This applicant has applied in both music and multidisciplinary arts as a discipline. Their pathway is performance and presentation. This artist starts by saying music has traditionally been a means of expression for the Yoruba culture. Over the years, traditional, what they call juju musicians started incorporating and introducing a greater number of Yoruba percussion and Western instruments. And so this particular artist has worked for about a decade, working with Sacramento area students and working in schools. He's sure to note that his work is focused on students within the Promise Zone area at some specific school campuses. And his vision is that in this program, students will learn how to better empower and understand themselves by exploring West African culture, folk tales, and traditions. This is a highly participatory art, and I appreciated so much being able to engage with the work sample. It made me smile, both the photos that were included of this artist working with students directly, and also the video provided. And one of the things that I appreciated most about the video was that not only did the students look like they were having an amazing time, but also everybody had a role, everybody was excellent at what they were doing. And it was very clear that they had taken some time to, not in a way that required, I think excellent is not the right word, not in a way that required perfection, but in a way that just appeared that all of the students were extremely excited to engage and that they understood the cultural relevance of this. My direct feedback to the artist is that I loved and appreciated the amount of cultural and historical intersections that this art is informed by, and the opportunities that creates to discuss identity with young children. I encourage this artist to think proactively about how to make this project sustainable, because it seems that his vision is to replicate this at as many schools as is possible. And the funding for this project will support some of that. But I encourage him to think about what it looks like to sustain the project.
I also just wanted to add that one of the questions in the guidelines that the artists were asked was to detail how their contribution has uniquely like impacted the discipline, or some wording to that extent. And I felt like in a lot of applications that I read, the responses were compelling and powerful, but not directly answering that question. But with this application, I really appreciated how the artist was very clear about exactly how they're uniquely contributing to the advancement of this discipline, and citing examples like partnering with the schools and advancing through community development and specific examples. So I just really found that compelling. So.
Thank you. And that concludes all the reviews. Make sure that everybody's put in a score for this. And then when we come back, we may have to remind a couple of you who just didn't maybe press submit. So we want to make sure all your scores are in for everybody. So that concludes the public portion of our grant panel. Our panelists are going to go back and review all of their scores, make sure we have scores for everybody. And we're going to look through to see who our final 45. And for those of you who are listening, we will also choose some alternates in case any of the 45 artists cannot continue or move forward with the contract. We want to make sure that we have 45 projects when we end this program. So thank you all for coming. Our applicants are going to be able to take about, maybe about 5 minutes just to kind of stretch. I've sent you all a Zoom link for the final meeting. So if you can all just stretch a little bit and come back, and that'll give Diana some time to just make sure that we have everyone's final scores for everything, and that we can create a report and see where the scores lie. So again, to all the attendees, thanks for coming. And just check your emails, panelists, for your new Zoom link. Okay, we good? Thank you all.